Hi guys, it's Adriana with Jack's Mom in Austin, and I am really excited to talk about how to talk so little kids will listen. I know that this book is pretty new. I think it just came out in January, or was just released in January for purchase through Amazon. It comes out to about under 20 bucks if you want to order it on Amazon, and I'll include the link in the blog, the follow-up blog that'll come to this. So you guys can grab it. But just a little bit about this book. So this book is by Joanna, I think I'm saying this correctly, Faber and Julie King. Now Joanna is actually the daughter of Adele Faber, who wrote How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, which has been a huge bestseller. I've heard so many amazing things about it. The problem with that book is that it's geared towards older children. And Jack is only 3, so I needed something that would allow me to respond to him and to interact with him that was age appropriate. So I was really excited when this book came out, and I purchased it, and I've gone through it. And aside from my favorite No Drama Discipline, this one is probably going to be right up there with that book on a recommended read for parenting, particularly for respectful or peaceful parenting, and just to help you connect with your kids so that we kind of steer clear of, punishment, timeout, but, we're not walked on. We don't want to be walked all over by our kiddos. So these are just really effective ways of dealing with your kids to help them out, to help them be, better kids, or not better kids, that's probably not the right word, but more empathetic and compassionate. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the great things about this book, and I'll go into a few other things outside of this book. And I do want to precursor this with, one, I do not have a degree in this. I do not have any certification in this. So this is solely my experience with Jack and anything I may have read before having Jack, doing activities with kids, story times, things like that I used to do. For different jobs. I also had a really big interest in child development for several years, but my experience ultimately comes down to one child. So this may not work for you or your family. It really is going to depend on how you take this information and how you incorporate it into your lives with your partner and with your child. That being said, I will also bring up a couple of questions that were asked of me the last couple of weeks after the first book review, which I was surprised that a few parents reached out and asked, parenting advice, for lack of a better word. I was asked a few questions, which I was very honored to be asked these questions, and I gave the best advice I could with the experiences that I've had, again, with just Jack. So, it may have helped, it may not have helped, but I do know that whatever I shared was something that I had experienced with Jack. It's something that I had tried with our family, and it worked, and it was great. So I will share that, and I'll also share how to engage your partner in these types of, parenting skills and parenting lessons. If you do decide to read these books, it's hard to make sure you're both on the same page, especially when you're reading and they're not really big readers, or you don't want to buy 2 copies of the same book. So I'll kind of talk about that for a little bit. So anyway, we'll start with this book. This book is great. I really, really enjoyed it. I love how helpful it is in just explaining, little ones and how you can talk to them, how you can engage with them, and how different they are from that age group that I call it like the twilight age, because it really is between, they're not tweens yet, but they're old enough to kind of get limitations and understand, yes and no and rules a little bit better. Not that your 3-year-old can't or your 2-year-old can't, but I think for 2 and 3-year-olds, logic is out the window. You tell them something, they might be completely literal about it. And once they get a little older, they can understand things a little differently. That is before hormones kick in at their teen years, and that logic goes out the window again, and they don't understand anything, it seems like. Again, I have not had a teenager, but all the reading I've done, I really feel like there's a correlation between 3 and teen years. And I really suspect that's why so many people say that 3-year-olds are 3-nagers, because it's very similar. that experiences the big emotions that come with hormones at that age, and with just big emotions of figuring life out at 3 when you've only existed for such a short amount of time. So anyway, so this book, it starts off talking about big emotions, which I think is really, really important when we're talking about little ones, because sometimes they don't understand their emotions. They don't understand what they're feeling. I mean, even us as adults, and I've gone over this before, we don't understand half of the emotions we feel at all. I can't name half of the emotions I feel. Sometimes I'll be so upset and I can't name exactly what angry or what upset emotion that is that I'm feeling. So I can just imagine being a toddler with someone hovering over you, giving you orders all the time, you know, trying to through and trying to work through a lot of heavy emotions. So this book really addresses, you know, having the patience with your kiddo to work with their emotions, to address these emotions and calling them what they are, which I think is really, really important, you know, by just addressing them lightly and letting them know you're really angry right now. I think just using those words is so great for them, because they can start to put a name to each emotion. Or you're really frustrated right now. You're really tired right now. It's such just a great way to help them put a title and a name to whatever emotion they're feeling, so that later on when they're older, it's easier for them easily and openly to tell you, this is how I feel, without you having to prompt them. And I really think that in the future will prove to be a good positive connection between parent and child, when your child is comfortable being open with you and expressing these emotions. So I really love that she goes into that, and how she addresses it even with a sibling situation, which is really important to me right now, because we are about to have another child, and I'm thinking, you know, am I going to be able to incorporate what I've learned with this book or with the books I've read with another child? Am I going to have that same patience, which is really hard to have, especially at this age. It's really difficult. So she goes over a lot of great ideas on how to address emotions, why it's important to address emotions, which I touched base on a little bit with you guys. And one of the best parts of this book, which I've read in several books, and I think it's becoming a trend, you'll see articles on it all over Facebook, all over the internet, is why punishment and timeouts do not work. They just don't work on kiddos. And I know for my generation, so I'm 35, I was born in the 80s, while things were changing, it was still very easy to swat on the butt. You know, even in school, they paddled. So we grew up understanding and knowing that type of punishment. So I think for us, it's a little different. It's a challenge to change our mind, our wiring, to not want to spank. And I think there was a time before having Jack where I thought, okay, you know, I'm not going to spank, but I will definitely do timeouts, because timeouts was the trend. But come to find out, timeouts are just as isolating as any other like punishment where you spank them. So they don't, you know, children don't really learn anything from it. And she goes over that in this, like, this chapter that she writes on just punishment is amazing, because it provides answers to all the arguments you have in your head on, like, well, you know, some kids just need to be spanked, or, you know, my child just needs time out. She really goes into depth on why these things are not effective. And the one thing that stuck out to me the most that I really appreciated was, you know, she asked, how do we want our children to approach conflict? What we're teaching them is that the easiest way to approach conflict is by punishment. And that's what we don't want them to learn. We don't want them to know that whenever something goes wrong, whenever someone's not doing something that they like, whenever they don't agree with something, that it's okay to hit. And unfortunately, when we're hitting them for doing something that we think is wrong, because a lot of times these little ones, they don't realize that it's wrong. To them, they're studying, they're testing limitations, they're figuring out if they can or cannot do something. They're not thinking of this as, I'm about to do something bad. So when we punishment, it's very confusing. When we punish them, it's very confusing. And she lists off, she bullets several reasons why it just does not work. And the great thing about, Joanna, is that she has actually done a lot of workshops where she talks to parents and talks them through these situations. And she has the parents answer saying, do you remember when you were a kid and you were punished and what your reaction was? And the answers, of course, weren't surprising. They were similar to things we would say, oh, I learned to lie better. I got in trouble and I realized I have to be a better liar, or I have to. So whatever you're learning as a kid, you're not learning the correct thing. If you don't punish, if you find another way to show your child that what they did was not right, it's going to be. So I won't give away too much of that, but that's probably one of my favorite chapters in this book, which is tools for resolving conflict, and avoiding punishment and timeouts was one of them, which I really liked. So one thing that we tried on Jack, take action in order to protect. So I was talking to the dad about this, and he wasn't reading the book. I was getting frustrated because he would be watching Jack and something would go wrong and they would quarrel, and I automatically in my head had the solution because I had read the book, but I also didn't want to get involved because I don't want Jack to see us not on the same front, right? So it was hard because I had this solution in my head, but I didn't know how to incorporate it. And I was telling Steven, who's Jack's dad, and my husband, that punishment and yelling at him was not going to work. And his argument was, he's just going to walk all over us then. And there's no limitations. And I was like, well, and he had a point, and I hadn't gotten to the part of the chapter where she says that you need to take action. You don't give a punishment, but you do take action. So taking something away from a child when they're doing something wrong, they're not going to see that as the way we want them to. So they're going to see that as that you're doing something mean to them. They're being isolated. It's just not, good. So if you're in a situation like at a playground and, your child won't stop throwing rocks and you say, we need to leave right now because I'm really afraid that another child is going to get hurt. One, you're not putting the blame on them. You're not saying, because I'm afraid you're going to hurt another child. And two, you're taking them out of the situation. So you're taking action, but you're not punishing. And I really liked that she broke that down, because then I could go back to Steven and say, hey, so he's not walking all over us. These are the solutions. This is what we can work with. And this ultimately provides both of us with an option on something that is that works for all of us, including Jack, because he does have a say, in his little life. And I know that's hard for some people to take in and to think about when they're only 3. We want them to do what we say, but in reality, they're their own little human. So we gotta allow them to make their own decisions and their own choices. So I really liked that. But something that we used on Jack that really, really worked. So everybody knows he's 3. We've been struggling with some serious independence, which, that shouldn't be a bad thing, but it gets really frustrating when they say no over and over again, or when they don't want to get anything done. When you're trying to get them out the door in the morning and breakfast is taking 45 minutes, which it has taken before. And changing the way that we approach to things in the morning was huge for us. We started kind of letting Jack know that, instead of saying you need to hurry up because you're going to be late, everything is directed at him, right? You. This is all your fault. So changing the word and saying the wording to the problem is helped us so much, and Steven picked up on that quickly, and it has helped so much. I don't even know what it is about changing the way we redirected that has been so effective. Sorry, my phone is ringing somewhere, but anyway. So, instead of saying you need to hurry up, you're going to be late, we would say, I know you're really tired right now and you don't want to get dressed. The problem is you're going to be late for school and you're going to miss snack. And for whatever reason, just saying the words that way he just, I don't know, he would just jump into action, and it just floored us when we tried that method, and it worked. So that was one of the first things in this book that we tried that I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is so different. So I really, really liked that. So it gives basically a resolution for, or troubleshooting, I guess, for conflict and for getting your kids to do things that they just don't want to do, especially when they're 3. And it's really hard because you think, like, why aren't you listening to me? Like, you really need to pay attention, which, I mean, they're 3, right? So I just really liked that. The other great thing about this book that is really important for parents that have children, I like the way she words it, so I'm going to word it the way she does. Tools for kids who are differently wired. So that's going to be the kiddos that have autism, or that are on the spectrum, or that are more sensitive. This chapter, at first, and she even says it, I was like, well, this might not be for me. And I started reading it, and I thought, this is for me. Because Jack is very willful, and he can also be very sensitive. So reading through this chapter and in using a lot of the things from this chapter were amazing. I really got a lot from this chapter, and I really think that parents would just, I mean, just any kid that you might think might be shy, or just if you just have to wonder if your kid would fit into this chapter, your kid will fit into this chapter. Because I know we all think at some point, you know, that our kid's shy, our kid, you know, won't do this, or whatever. I really think this chapter will help every parent. Another thing that I wanted to touch on with this chapter that has been kind of a sensitive issue for us. So Jack is very verbal. He's a very chatty little boy. And in the last couple of weeks, we've been out at different places, and we've stumbled across other little boys his age. And every time the parent has to say something like, okay, for perfect example, Barnes & Noble, Jack starts talking to their little boy, and the mom asks how old Jack is, and I say he's 3. And I ask how old her little boy is, and she says he's going to be 4 next month, but we're going to get him speech therapy. I don't know her. I didn't know how to respond to that. And I always feel like I have to list off what my child is not good at, because almost as an apology for the fact that he's so verbal. I've stopped doing that. I've learned that that's not good either, especially because now Jack hears everything I say, and I don't need him hearing me say, well, he's bad at this, he's bad at that, to compensate. So this chapter, there's a whole section on, you know, how to speak to and encourage children that have, I mean, they might be speech delayed, they might not be, they just might have a harder time getting words across. They might be younger, they might be, you know, a year and a half or 2, and they're not going to be able to convey as much as Jack can at 3. So I really liked that she mentioned that and she put that in here, because one thing I've noticed with that encounter with that mom was that she was getting really frustrated with her little boy for not being able to interact with Jack the way she wanted. And it's no fault to her. It is very frustrating. And I was frustrated on my end because Jack got frustrated with the child and ultimately walked away from him because he couldn't understand what he was saying. And he kept trying, and I give him that, and I was really proud that he kept trying, and he kept trying to problem solve with the little boy. But in the end, it just didn't work out, and that's fine too. But for both of us, it was just a very awkward situation, and that's happened several times in the last month. I don't know what it's been that, you know, the mom has to say, we're getting them speech therapy, or, you know, we're working on his speech, because kiddos are all different, and I will say from all the children that we see, Jack is actually the one that's not the norm in terms of speech. So I love that she puts that in there, because I really think that that's something that's important for parents to know how to deal with, and it's going to help me in the future too, because if I'm in a situation like that again, I can go ahead and maybe, you know, work with the little boy too, or the child too, to kind of, you know, bring down the stress in that situation where we both don't know how to interact with each other or with our kiddos. So I really liked that. She goes on into the chapter to discover just, you know, basics of why your child might be acting the way they're acting, which I think that one pretty much everybody knows, but it's good to touch base on, which is sleep and food. If your kiddo is losing it and they're 2, 3, 4, even older, I feel like it's usually because they're hungry or they're tired. And that has proven, since Jack was teeny tiny, that has always been, when he's really losing it, it's because he's one or the other. She definitely covers that in her book, and I like that she, you know, reminds us of that, because even when they're 3, 4, 5, that can still be the issue. So I thought that was really great in this book. Anyway, this book was amazing. I'm just going to say that it was amazing, and it really helped me deal with a lot of stuff going on in transitions with Jack, because I do think he's feeling the fact that we're about to add another person into our family, and we're kind of all struggling with that and the adjustments that are going to be made. So this book has been really, really helpful. So add this book, grab this book, buy this book. You can check it out from the library. I checked it out first, and I loved it so much I ended up buying it, because this is one that I have a feeling I'm going to use for a while. So I definitely recommend you guys going and grabbing it. And we'll put this right under No Drama Discipline, because No Drama Discipline was hands down my favorite, and I'll go over that book in the near future. I just really want to have some more practice with that book before I talk about it. So, talked about the book, and now I'm going to go over a couple of things, a couple of questions that parents recently asked me, and how I answered it, and if I feel it was effective or not. I did have 2 moms come back and say that it was super helpful, which made me feel awesome, because you know, I'm doing this with Jack. I'm winging it half the time, and I'm hoping it works. And while it works for me, it might not work for you guys. So it's really nice to see that other parents are doing this, responding this way, and that they're getting the same reaction or the same outcome. That's really positive. So I had a parent come to me, and I hope, I mean, I'm not going to say names, but she's a single mom, and she said, you know, I don't know what to do. My 4-year-old is basically out of control when he comes home, and it's so hard to deal with him when at school he's perfectly well behaved, and his teachers love him, he does so well. Like, what am I doing wrong? And most importantly, you guys are not doing anything wrong. If you love your child, you're doing everything right, because that means that you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to work with them. Like, all we want to do is love them. And don't ever say, what am I doing wrong? Because it's not that you're doing anything wrong. You're just always going to be trying to figure it out. And that's a better way of looking at it. So I told her, you know, you're not doing anything wrong. And the thing that's difficult about this situation is that, you know, she's a single mom, and that makes things a lot harder, but she's a rock star for knowing that maybe there's some help she could get, maybe there's something she can read. And she's like, is there something I can read? Like, where do I go? Where do I start? Which I thought was awesome also for her to ask. And I told her, you're actually doing an amazing job, because he's coming home and he's reacting the way he's reacting because he knows that at the end of the day, you're still going to love him. You're not going to reject him. He has spent his entire day being this well-behaved, great child, because this is what he's learning from her. This is what he's grabbed, and he's going and practicing this at school in a social setting, and he's so tired by the end of the day that he comes home and that guard comes down and he's safe. He knows mom's not going to stop loving him, and he doesn't have to be, you know, he doesn't have to keep practicing. He doesn't have to be anything. He can be pissed off. He can be tired. He can let go because you're still going to love him. And I think that's something that's so important to remember, because we think they're being bad, but they're not. They're feeling safe. And I used to work for CPS, which was probably one of the most difficult jobs I've ever had in my whole life. And I will say that's where the dichotomy comes, where you know something's wrong in the home when the child acts up at school, or when something's wrong at school, because it originates somewhere, and usually it's, and I'm not saying parents are bad or anything, but sometimes something's going on. And for him to be her little boy to be doing so well in school, that means that he's taking what he's learning from her to be patient, to be compassionate, to be loving, to be well behaved, and using it at school, and then coming home and just relaxing and just letting loose because he can. So I really think that, that we need to remember that, and kiddos can't be perfect all the time, and they're going to be their least perfect around us because they can. They're safe. That being said, what I mentioned earlier about the connection between 3-year-olds, teenagers, I read a lot of books on adolescence, and I guarantee you from everything I've read, this is going to happen again. And I'm going to use the same analogy because as a teenager, I know I don't have a lot of teenage parent followers, but I really think that, kids are going to, especially females, when they come home and they react and they're angry at you and they're pissed off, they've got all these hormones going on, they're letting loose because you're not going to oust them. You're not going to kick them out of the dinner table. When your kid is horrible at the dinner table, you're not going to say, you know what, you're out of the group. At school, though, if they're jerks at school, they're not going to be able to be part of that lunch table anymore. So I know it probably doesn't mean anything now, but I'm going to try my best to remember that when Jack is a teenager with everything going on. That's why they're a teenager. So I will try my best to remember that. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. The other question I got was, sorry, these are coming off the top of my head, was about, so it's a friend of ours that has a 4-year-old that, and I've heard this before and I've used this with Steven because it's just so great. So the child, normally a great kiddo, just easygoing, doesn't have a hard time, and they had just finished potty training, and the dad was really frustrated because they had a full week of no potty training, and then after that, it was accident after accident. And we've been there with Jack. We've been there for like a year where he's completely potty trained, and now if he's playing too hard, he will not go potty. So I understood where that frustration was coming from, but the thing that got me was when the dad said, I just don't get it. He's been doing this for a week, and now all of a sudden he doesn't want to do it. He's doing it on purpose. And that was where I said he's not, because here's the thing. Us as adults, we have a really hard time. We have a really bad day. We come home. We're really frustrated. And let's say you're usually, you work with your kiddo to calm them, to make sure they have dinner, to make sure they get started on their homework, whatever. But this particular day, you're just so fed up. You just don't want to deal with it. And you just can't, and we've all been there. So I think the important question here is, are you doing it on purpose? We're not. We love our kids. We don't want to do these things. When we're frustrated, we don't want to do these things. I'm so sorry about my phone again. But anyway, so that being said, it was, really, I've said this to the dad before because we've been in the exact same situation where he's like, he was doing this for several days. Why is he not doing it now? Because that day, he can't. Something's up. He's having a growth spurt. He's leaping. He's hungry, whatever. For whatever reason, at that moment, Jack cannot do what he's done for 5 days straight. He's having a rough day, just like adults. So that was a really cool conversation we got to have, because I had had that experience with a dad, and then for us to go to another dad that was also feeling that frustration, and being able to talk it out was really cool. And I got that from No Drama Discipline, where in my head I was thinking, why can't he? And she says, this is why. So I thought that was really cool. And then the last question was from another parent, also potty training, which is interesting, but I guess because we've done the potty training thing, there was a friend of ours that's potty training their 3.5-year-old, who also, accidents. And I know accidents is so hard, especially once you train them or they learn how to potty and they're doing great, and then all of a sudden it's out the window. Again, we've been there. So the situation with that was poop, which is not fun. We got so lucky that we have a toddler. I really want to stop that phone before it gets going, so I'm going to stop the phone. Okay, sorry. So anyway, so poop. We got really lucky that our toddler, Jack, has never had a poop accident. I don't know how that has happened, but he just hasn't had one, and that's great. So this is also only going to be, I mean, I have no experience in this, but this is something I suggested that worked, so I was really proud of myself because it came from a book, as usual. But their little boy will poop sometimes in the potty and sometimes will not. And it was figuring out why, what is going on that he will sometimes and he won't sometimes. So we kind of talked about it for a while, and we figured out that when he was going in the potty, he had underwear on. So they were alternating between training pants and underwear. And I think for him, and of course this is all speculation because I'm like, what is going on in this kiddo's head that, the underwear, it's not okay to poop in, but in the training pants, it is. So I had read at some point somewhere, and I can't tell you where, so I'm sorry, that a lot of times with training pants, it actually sets them back because they feel it's a diaper. So it's okay to poop or pee in your diaper, but it's not okay to poop in your pants or underwear. So it was just the craziest thing because that one suggestion, that one little thing to tell them, they tried it and they took away training pants. He stopped pooping in his pants. It was the craziest thing. So it was a total win for me because I was like, maybe this is it. And it really was. So I thought that was really great. So if any of you are having potty issues and you need some help, I might be able to help. I'm not saying I can, but I'm willing to help you guys because I've had 2 potty things recently that have been really effective. And we have been potty trained for 1.5 years, so who knows. Anyway, other than that, the last thing I'm going to cover is being on the same page as your partner. That has been interesting for us because I'm the reader and Steven works a lot and doesn't get to read as much as I do. So sometimes I am just, dying because I have the solution for whatever the problem is, but I can't enact it because, Steven will be taking care of Jack at that moment, and, however he deals with it, I need to let that happen. I need to let that play out because, like I said earlier, we need to be on the same front, and Jack needs to see that. What's been really helpful is talking to each other in the evenings and kind of touching base on what's effective, why it's effective. And another thing is, I've been really busy lately and really tired, so I haven't been as hands-on with Jack, and I kind of have taken that back a little bit slowly and jumped in, in a situation and kind of acted out whatever I'm learning and made sure that Steven knew that this is a new approach we're trying, watch me. And I know, basically the idea of if you teach it, you learn it better yourself, and someone else is also learning that situation or whatever you're doing. So that has been super helpful if I do it once or a couple times and Steven's watching and then he incorporates it, and we're on the same page and we're both doing the same thing, and Jack's not confused, and it's been really effective and awesome. And I might just be really lucky that Steven's amazing and he, it works for us. I don't know. He's not, I'm just suggesting that because someone asked us recently, or asked him, hey, do you read all the books that she reads? How do you do the same thing? And he's like, I don't, but I watch her and see what she does, and then I copy it. And I was like, okay, so we are, yeah, that's awesome. That I would never have thought to prompt him and say, hey, can you watch me do this? And, whatever. So I thought that was really good. But the most important thing is really touching base in the evenings once Jack is in bed, and never in front of him, because kids are smart and they'll know and they'll call you out on whatever you're doing the next day. It's crazy. I don't care how little they are. So make sure you don't do it in front of them so that you're on the same page in private, and then the next day they won't even know it hit them. So that's pretty much it for this. I recommend this book. Amazing book. If you guys have any questions about the book or anything really, pertaining to parenting, pertaining to Jack's mom in Austin, or what's going on locally, I'll be more than happy to answer that for you. There's a lot of fun stuff coming up here in Austin for those of you that live here that want to go do Easter things. Imagine That Art Studio is going to have a family art class. The Art Garage also has a lot of Easter family things coming up. Every Friday they have a storytime art craft that's totally worth it. And I think that's about it. I can't think of anything else. I do have a few Lunchbox Lives coming up that are definitely worth watching, and they're 2 sleep consultants and a doula and a homeschool teacher. I have all of them coming up, and I think it's worth watching them. I'm going to have them answer some of your questions, particularly the sleep consultants. The doula is Stephanie from Rev Doula. Amazing woman, super knowledgeable. She's not only a birth and postnatal doula, but she also has some lactation counseling in her background. She teaches birth classes. She's awesome. So she'll be able to answer some of your questions, and I'll have Lori from Strong Little Sleepers here as well. You can ask her questions. That's all coming up in the next 2 months before I have numero dos. And then I might take like a 2-week break and jump back into it, and then maybe you'll just see me here freaking out with a 2-week-old and not knowing how to balance the blog and a newborn. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me. Those of you that did, I had a few of you joining me. I really appreciate it. Any input on this will be great. There'll be a follow-up blog on this with links to where you can buy the book and to who's coming up next on Lunchbox. And I hope you guys have a lovely weekend, and you'll be hearing from us next week after our amazing visit to Gerald and Piggy Live by Mo Willems. I'm very excited about that. So look forward to that, and I will talk to you guys next time.